Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're still awake. I've been up since 4:15 this morning, so I'm a little bit tired, but I'm excited to speak here. And just to correct a little bit, it says here that it's right. I'm the director of City Data Exchange in Copenhagen. I'm going to tell a little bit about the background, because the City Data Exchange is a result of a tender carried out by the City of Copenhagen and the capital region and a cluster organization called CLEAN. So the City Data Exchange, actually my background, which is interesting as well, is that I was the Smart City Director for the cluster organization, and I was actually writing the tender specifications for the City Data Exchange as well. And the reason why I came by was that in this cluster organization we have 175 companies, 8 cities, 5 universities. And we wanted to see, we talk about smart cities, we talk about big data. Big data is the new gold, the new oil. We heard about that today as well. So how do we actually make data accessible for everyone? How can we actually start to use it? Because we talked about it for a long time, how we're actually gonna try and make it available. So what we did before the tender came out was to interview 75 companies, a few universities, and then go to about 15, 20 open data portals that's already available around the world. Just to see, how does it work? How do they actually interact with the ecosystem around it? The companies, the universities, whoever is interested in looking at data. So the tender was the idea was well, we need to create a marketplace for data where you can get, data where it's accessible. You also have to be able to sell it and to buy it. So this is actually a marketplace, a platform where you can sell and buy your data. That was the key thing. And on top of that, we wanted the consortiums to look at, or the companies' consortiums to look at, what are there are some challenges in order to do that. So what are they? So one of them is, what is actually the incentive for companies to give away their data? There's been some insights already today that you might not be willing to do it because we're going to use it internally ourselves first. What's the incentives to use data? We heard that a lot today. I think there was a lot of good points there. The other thing is about security, privacy. How do you handle that when you have to buy and sell data openly? The third thing, it's a shame Bjørn is not here because that's about governance. And the fourth thing, oh, you're there. Sorry, Bjørn. So I won't talk much about it, but that's it is a key thing, absolutely. And the fourth thing, which separates this a lot from all the other platforms that's out there, is that it's actually Hitachi who owns the platform with our partners. So it's not the city, so it's not a publicly owned platform. It is a partnership with the city, and we have a contract with them, and we have to deliver some things within the first 5 years, and then it's ours, and we can do with it what we want. So a key thing is to find a business model for buying and selling data and make a living out of that. So just to look at how the open data landscape actually looks like. If you see that from a company perspective, basically anyone who wants to try and access some data. Well, if you look to Copenhagen, just the greater Copenhagen region, on the right-hand side for you, the existing open data. That's the open data portal in the city. There is the Danish environmental portal. You can get a lot of different kinds of data sets. The third one is the journey planner, weather data, the city bike, company data, and all kinds of data. So this is already available. You can just go and get that. The problem is that you have to spend a lot of time signing up, getting approved for this. When you finally get into it, it's all kind of different formats. So already at this point, I talked to some of the companies, they said, already now, I'm not going to bother because it's too difficult to actually to get it. When I start to have to combine data sets, it's all in different formats, and it's just too much hassle. And this is already available, so that's a barrier. The private sector data, I've talked to companies that they're already selling data. We heard Telefonica earlier today as well. So this is already happening, but business to business. And if you need as a company to go out and try and get data for 1, 2, 3 companies, that is going to take you a long time to get access to data. There's a lot of steps you have to go through there. Then there's another source of data from projects in cities, projects at universities. You get a lot of data in these kind of projects, and you use it for one purpose, which is defined by that project. and then you put it away somewhere. But actually that data you create there could actually be useful for other ones as well. So can you make that accessible as well? So basically what we're trying to do here is to say, well, from these sources and other sources, could we make a one-stop shop where you can actually access this data? And some of the barriers, the Danish Ministry for Business and Growth, I call it business authorities, they made a report where they interviewed a lot of different companies and say, well, this is back to the incentive part. So what are the barriers and opportunities working with big data? And we talk about some of these things today. The results was some of the key things is the competences. This is both in big and small companies that it's really difficult to get the right skills to deal with the data. That's one thing. We talked about regulation and security, the privacy issue as well. How do I actually deal with my data? Can I give it to somebody else? We might not have those skills either. Economical constraints. One is technology, investment in technology to deal with it. Another thing actually to go and search for the data, and that was equally important. It just takes too long time and costs too many resources in terms of going to find the data. Lack of big data know-how. This is more related to what can we actually use it for. We know it's there. We have our own data. We know other people have data we can use, but we're not really sure what the business case is. And the fifth part, that's the data accessibility. Is there, but it's not accessible, and that's a huge barrier. So what we saw when we went around to look at all these other open data platforms, the one in Denmark and the ones abroad, is that you have a platform and there's some data, and then you're sitting waiting around for things to happen, and then things don't really happen. The whole key to this is to try and look at, well, the ecosystem around it. Who is actually going to use this? And what are their challenges? And what is the opportunities? What is the supplier side of the data side? What is their challenges? Why are they not giving away their data? Or why should they? So what is their challenge? We saw some of them before. The other one is on the demand side. What are people asking for? And we're not just talking about companies here, but we are startup companies. It could be app developers. It can be large companies in different sectors. So that's one thing. What about universities? And the cities also want to buy data. So how is this whole ecosystem? You need to build that up and understand the ecosystem before you can actually make something like this. So what we are doing in practice is we're developing the technical side of the platform, how it looks, if you have to go and purchase data, how do you actually do that? So we're testing that with all of these user groups, everything from citizens, students, professors, companies, small, big and large, and also the, the cities as well, the city authorities. So everything we do, we test in focus group. On top of that, we have a group of companies that we think are the most interesting company in terms of the data. We said some of them today is energy data. And the reason why they're the most interesting is because the data is hard to get. So it's energy data from the energy companies. It's mobile data is another thing. You also have data from insurance companies. They are also demanding a lot of data. From the banks as well is another issue. So we take these companies and we've asked them a lot, so if you have to be part of this ecosystem, you have to sell your data or buy data, what is the biggest obstacles? And number one is data privacy, so that we are dealing with. The other one is data ownership, that's been mentioned before as well. Who actually owns the data? And there's a gray zone there as well. The other thing is pricing of data. So how do we actually price our data? How much are people willing to pay for it? Some want flexible pricing, some want to give it for free to students, but want to charge 1 million Danish kroner or 100,000 pounds to Google, for example. So how do they actually deal with these issues? So this is why we have these workshops to make them confident to work with us on this data platform to sell and to buy data. And the lawyers we are working with, they are extremely busy to try and make them comfortable. So this is the process, and this is going to continue. I think when we start to go live, I'll come back to that at the end when we do that. So we continue to develop the technical side of it and also the business side of it to develop this ecosystem. And these kind of goes hand in hand. So because some of the issues that we see that the companies have, this could also be that they don't want to mention their name. They don't want to say, they want to anonymize the data and say, not in terms of the kind of data as they don't want to say, it's not from an energy company, say we don't want to say who we are, we would like to sell the data, but we don't want to say who we are. And the buyers say we would like to buy it, but we don't want to say who we are. So some of these things we can deal with technically, and other things we need to get contracts and so on in order to deal with it. So what we're dealing with here, one of the big issues, I also heard that a little bit today, is that the data suppliers, a lot of the companies and all of these other types of data suppliers, they know that the data has some value. And as we heard today as well, there's some obvious consumers who want to buy the data. Quite often the companies say, well, we already know who's buying our data, who's interested in it. But we had a workshop where there were 60 companies present, and we just walked around and said, just mention a couple of data sets you have. And then we want everyone else to raise their hand if they're interested in buying this data set. Not just interested in it, actually paying for the data set. So a couple of companies just said, we have this data set A, B, and C. And surprisingly, there was like 6, 7 companies that actually raised their hand, we would like to pay for that. So in that process, we found out, so what's actually the incentive for companies to put their data on this city data exchange? So one thing is, of course, monetization, so you can actually earn money on it. And the other one is, they got quite surprised when they saw who is it actually who are interested in our data. And that is about 50-50 when you look at the incentives. One is money, the other one is to find new business partners. And these kind of, especially the small companies who already works with data visualization and so on, they were some of the ones that raised their hands. But also a totally different type of companies, the architects, for example, they said, we would like that. And they said, why are you interested in this? And that's actually the whole point of this as well, to find new business partners that you can actually develop new products, new services, even new markets with. So that is a key, and we're trying now to explore how can we actually get them to meet. And the biggest obstacle has been for both sides. They said, we don't know where to meet. We don't know where to find the suppliers of the data. Well, we don't know. They're really hard to access. On the other hand, they say, we don't know who our consumers are. So who's actually going to buy our data? So one thing they say, well, it's too expensive to put the data on the platform. So if we have to go out and get all the data, if you take the cars, for example, the car manufacturers, and we already heard that they have a lot of data when they drive around in the cars. They actually measure air quality. But say, if we have to get that data in there physically, that's going to cost us, let's just say, £20,000. So, and how do we actually know that anyone in it is interested in this? So this is just another barrier for one of these things. But then we try to look at how can we actually try and deal with this issue as well. So that, in this way, we're saying, well, just describe your data set, and we'll make this mechanism on the web page, which will be that people can show interest. So that's one thing. Don't put all the effort into this, trying to get this data available on the web page. Wait to see if anyone is interested first. And that kind of sparked the interest of a lot of companies that, well, then we're ready. Then we would like to do that. That sounds quite interesting. So just a little preview. This is what it looks like just now. That would change over time as well. So what you'll be able to is to go into basically a web page. So you can go and explore the data. You don't have to sign up or anything to do that. You can just go in and search for different types of data sets. So that could be anything you want. You can also consume data, publish data. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And one of the key things here is that is the security of this, of course. I know there will probably be a lot of questions about that. So every person, every company, every city that provides data to the platform will have to make a contract with us. So all the data sets, we're working again a lot with the lawyers in order to deal with privacy and these things. to make sure that the data that's on the platform, first of all, is aggregated data, so there's no personalized data, and also we are complying to the different kind of legislation that's there. So all of that is also in place. And then, of course, you can consume data. And the different way you can consume data is a one-time download, or you can subscribe to data, and so on. And again, the first idea was just to have one-time downloads. But when we start to talk to the demand side, an example is insurance companies. They say, well, we don't want to buy a one-time download. We can't really use that for anything. But if you can promise us, we can get data on a weekly basis for company A, B, C, D, and there was actually quite a lot of companies that said, then we would be interested in buying it and paying quite a high price for it. So one of the things with these contracts is as well is to secure the supply of data. And again, this is something that makes the companies feel comfortable dealing with this instead of B2B. We get that a lot from the companies when we speak to them. They say, we are not confident that we are complying to the rules when we go business to business. And also, we would like a third party to be in control of some of these things as well. And again, when I've been in searching on some of these data sets and on some of the other open data platforms, it's really difficult to find the data sets, and they look different in each platform you go into. This is to make it to something we've already seen before. This could be Amazon or anything. The only difference is that here, there's a lot of difference actually, but what you can get here is you search for data. So you can write mobility data or transport or energy or water and so on, and you get a list of kind of data sets that you want from all of these different kind of data sources that I mentioned before. So both private sector data, public sector data, so this is the idea of this one-stop. Some of the data will be free, and some of the data you have to pay for. Another way to present it is to have it on the maps. So if you're a company, especially doing city projects, which is some of the ideas about this as well, to see what kind of information can I actually get in this area. If I'm doing any type of project, a building project or something, what kind of data can I actually access for this particular area? So this is just another way to search for it. And the reason why we've done it is that people are actually asking for this as well. So what we are doing just now is to try and make some of these use cases. So we work a lot with both the supply and the demand side to try and see how does this actually work. And we are going to go live in 29th of February next year. And at this point, we'll only invite companies and students and the ones we already work with to be part of this. Basically to test the system and to test the model. Does it actually work? But then in May, it'll be possible for Danish companies, international companies, and so on, actually to go in and use the open, the City Data Exchange to the data marketplace. So, but purpose, I've gone quite quickly through this because I know it's late, and I would also like some questions, so we're not still falling asleep. So I can go back and tell more about this, but I actually prefer to have some questions if there's anyone there who has that. I expected that.
How do you ensure data quality? Because you're buying and selling a product.
Yeah.
It's the same question.
Yeah, how do we ensure quality? Because we are buying and selling data. Yeah. First of all, we're not buying the data. So we're not going out to the companies saying, we would like to buy your data and sell it on for you. So they're just putting their price on it, so they're selling it themselves. So one thing is through the contracts, that is a legal obligation. So if you can say, you and I can go out and make a data set and basically just sell it. So there's a legal obligation that we have in terms of the quality of the data will be in these contracts as well to ensure that. That's not 100% proof, we know that. The other thing is that we allow users to rate the data sets. So if somebody uses and say this is definitely not as good as we thought it would be, so they can rate it like 1 out of 5 stars, so it could be or no stars at all. And they can also comment on the data sets. So that's another thing. We also do checks within Hitachi, so we can't check all the data that comes in. That's impossible. But we do some checks before we actually put it on the web page. So we'll go in and do some checks as well on the validity. But I think any of the data platforms that's out there, there's one in the Netherlands as well with energy. Alliander, a Dutch company, is putting data out. And some of the feedback they got was actually, your data sets are not very good, but this is how you improve them. So it's one of the things we keep working on as well, and it's a very important issue as well.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, good. Fortunately, we have a bit of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take a couple more. We have one here, and then we're going to do... Oh, actually, let's do the one in the back, because you have a mic close to you. And then I'll give you...
I wasn't quite sure about the data linkage potential. So are they just separate data sets, or is there ability to link them?
If we will link them, or...
Well, either way, either you could provide a linking service, or have you sort of, when you've spoken to the suppliers, has it been with the view that they could be linked to other data sets, or was it all done very individually?
I think the whole purpose of this is to be able to link data sets. And this is also talked about the formats. That is really important, that you can actually, just geolocation data comes in so many different ways. So we can't say you have to put the data in that way, but we say if you want to sell it, if you want to earn money on it, it's probably good to have it in that format in order to be able to link it. So that's one thing. We suggest formats that they should put it in on. The other thing is that on the first release, we will just have it like you saw here. The other one is that we will provide a service where we actually also want to link data for the customers. But on the other hand, there's so many companies out there, and this is what the City of Copenhagen said. One thing is to improve city solutions by making data accessible. But they also want these companies, and a lot of these small companies with data scientists, is for them to be able to access this data, take the data out, combine the data, and then give it back either to the data owners or to other customers. So it's to enable that, and I think that has been one of the barriers, because we've got so many of these small companies working with data, based on data, that's their whole business. But I said, if you can just access this data, you wouldn't believe how much value we could bring to a lot of different, we heard some of the cases today, and they said if we can access it, but we can't do that at the moment. We have to go out and knock doors, and it's too difficult to access the data. But they don't want, it's not Hitachi that's going to go in and do all of the data analysis and the linking of data. We will, of course, provide that service as well. But the whole idea is actually to get other companies to be able to do that, which is a barrier at the moment because it's not accessible.
Okay, we'll take one other question, and then we can move on. But will you be around at the cocktail later so that everybody can talk to you?
Yeah, I'm not flying back today, no.
Okay, great. Sorry, I promised this one here.
What conclusion did you come to on pricing? Because as a data consumer, I can very, very nicely and easily work out how much I think the data is worth. But then as a seller, I'd quite like to sell it for exactly what everybody thinks it's worth, and that will probably not be the same.
Yeah. I wish I had a conclusion. Thankfully, there's still 3 months before it goes live. It's one of the key topics. Of course it is. And I think one thing is the cost price. So how much does it actually take for you in technology and hours to make this data available? So that's when you kind of break even. So that's one price. Then if you want to earn money on it, and then you don't know how many is going to buy it. So this is why we put that option in. Don't spend all the money putting the data in until you know somebody is interested. I also talked about the search function. So one thing is you can search for the data, but if the data is not available, we also have we're going to have 3-4 people working there. So you can actually request data. If you can't find it there, you can request it for us. And then we start to look at how many is actually interested in this. And then we'll go to the data suppliers and say, well, we actually have 8 companies who are interested in your data. And then we try and look at a price. So some companies know exactly what they want from the data. And some have absolutely no idea. So it's a bit like eBay. That's how we see it. So you put it out on a high price, and nobody's buying it. Well, you have to lower the price. At some point, people will start to buy it, and then you kind of find your level. And then you learn, the longer the City Data Exchange will run, then you get an idea of how it is. I think that's how it's going to work. So.
Okay, thank you. Great questions. In the interest of time, we have to move on. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Peter.
You're welcome.
As he mentioned, he'll be around, so feel free to stick around and ask him some more questions during the cocktail. The next use case is from